welcome. Thank you all so much for taking the time to attend. This webinar is run by the IUCN's National Committee UK's Education and Communication Working Group. My name is Sophie Stenson and I'm the chair of the working group, and it is an absolute pleasure to be talking to you all today. For anyone new to the IUCN CEC, sorry, we seem to have someone's mic on there. If that's all right, can we mute the mics? Thank you. So for anyone new to the IUCN CEC, that's the Commission on Education and Communication. And the purpose of this UK working group is to support the work of the IUCN's global CEC and its initiatives. So we aim to bring together individuals and organisations that are passionate about nature conservation and facilitate collaboration. The IUCN CEC has been an important actor in the interpretation and realisation of communication and education work as part of the CBD, and is involved in the intergovernmental sphere by participating in the Conference of the Parties, so COP processes, on advisory committees and other major conventions and events. We also complement the work of other NCUK working groups with experts on the climate crisis, ecosystem restoration, and protected areas, just to name a few. So if you're interested in becoming a member of the CEC or any of the IUCN commissions, individual membership is completely free, and you can find out more by following this link posted here, or by using the QR code here. There's also more information about the working groups on our website if you follow the link here. And we've also posted a recording of the initial meeting where we have more information about all of this on our YouTube channel and also on the website. So these links are going to be shared with you all via email following the webinar, and we will be sharing the links and to be able to join as a member as well. So today's webinar is one of a series of 5 planned, focused on the IUCN's priority themes. So our first webinar, as mentioned, was an introduction to the Education and Communication Working Group. And the recording has been posted on our YouTube channel. Sorry, we seem to have someone's mic on as well. Could you check that the mics are all muted? Just so that we can have some sound clarity, if that's all right. Thank you so much. So yes, the introductory webinar was about a month ago, so you can all watch that back on our YouTube channels and website. Today's webinar is going to be focused on nature education for sustainability, and we're looking forward to January 2023 for our next webinar on youth engagement and intergenerational partnerships. Future webinar themes are also still in the works, but we want to really listen to what our members are interested in and provide opportunities to discuss these topics. So please do share in the chat box any themes which you would like us to discuss. So without further ado, we are really looking forward to hearing from our 2 expert speakers today on the theme of nature education for sustainability. So nature education and nature connection are part of and promoted through the formal, non-formal and informal education systems. Education is recognised as an important driving force for achieving conservation and sustainability, and education harnesses the opportunities for learning offered by nature. It inspires and helps to re-establish deep connections between humans and nature. So curricula should really integrate nature education that connects climate change, biodiversity, and protected areas in a living systems holistic approach. I'd like to extend a special thank you and welcome to our 2 speakers for today, Erin Threlfall and Mary Colwell. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak to us today about your work. So we're pleased to welcome Erin Threlfall as our first speaker, who is an education leader, consultant, and freelance writer. Erin has an incredibly varied professional background, as you can see here, and will be talking to us today about her experience in working with international schools on incorporating sustainable development goals into their curriculum to inspire children at a young age to build emotional connections to the natural world. So over to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's such a pleasure to be invited to join today and be able to contribute to the important work that you're up to. As we get going, I just want to set a preference to how I am going to be coming at this. My work, I've done extensive research on happiness and well-being. So I founded something called Happiness 101, teaching children the habits for happiness. And along the way, I also work with different schools across the globe on building curriculum for significance and meaningful engagements from with their learners. And in that work of that, creating really meaningful content, along the way, I met up with another researcher who was researching sustainable practices. And what her research was showing that the more we show the happiness connection with natural environment, the more we can build for sustainable practices. And so all of a sudden, I started to see this really beautiful interweave between the work I was doing with developing meaningful curriculum tied to the Sustainable Development Goals and my research on happiness and well-being. And so along the way, that's created this snowball of diving in deeper to see how do we begin with our smallest humans to help them see how their happiness is connected to the natural environment, as well as helping educators see that the more we engage our youngest learners with a sense of agency, knowing that they can take action for a better world, not only the happier they'll be, but the more engaged with the content and the curriculum. So it all just starts to kind of interweave in this beautiful braid. So that preface is to say, I kind of stumbled upon this work by really focusing on happiness and significant content. The nature education started to come in as just the perfect thread through all of it. So Sophie, we can just move on to the next slide. So I mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. They're a really powerful framework that are set forward to ask member nations of the UN to help achieve these 17 goals, or 16 plus 1, as we often like to say. And they were originally kind of seen as this big government level work. And as educators connected through the UN, we started to ask, how can we actually bring this to our youngest learners? Because we're not going to achieve them if it's just seen as something left at government level. Next slide. And so constantly coming back to this big idea that engaging with meaningful and significant content can transform the learning experience and promote deep learning. And grappling with the second big idea, next slide, that engaging with the natural environment promotes happiness, increases sustainable practice, and enhances student engagement with meaningful learning. We started to ask, what could this actually look like in our curriculum, going from 3-year-olds all the way up through our oldest learners? Next slide. So again, asking that question, why, how, and what? I apologize, the coloring on the slides has gotten off a little bit, but this is Simon Sinek's famous slide, his circles, where Simon Sinek says we need to get corporations and individuals asking why they do what they do before they answer how and what, whereas we often say what before we answer the others. So why do we need this understanding for our learners? Why does it matter that they connect with the Sustainable Development Goals? Next slide. If we come back and look at the core purpose of education as set forth by the Conventions on the Rights of the Child from the United Nations, right number 25 talks about the core aim of education to help them fully develop their personalities and talents. And ultimately, it should help them to live peacefully and protect the environment. Next slide. And then our biggest why is asking, what kind of person do we aim to grow? If we really want to grow these happy individuals who are nature literate, who will engage with the natural world, how do we go about doing that? And what is the purpose that we can help our youngest learners understand why it matters they connect with the natural environment? Next slide. So again, coming back to these global goals that seem really big, seem really out of reach for our youngest learners. Next slide. That are already, they're already being incorporated into major corporations, major universities. So Harvard, the Stanford University IMD, which is a very famous business school, are incorporating the Sustainable Development Goals. You can find just about any major corporation now is talking about how they would connect. So how do we bring it down to our youngest learners? So beginning with their self of why they need to understand this is how we know that even our youngest learners begin. They're in this me-centric space. So what's in it for them? And then growing out into that wider circle, what's in it for the community, and how do they connect it to the world? So beginning with the self, how do we help make this attainable for the youngest learners? Next slide. So research would talk about that how the connection with the natural environment can help increase mood, can help increase that cognition and your health, making sure that you just feel happier. So getting children out into the natural environment and not even talking about why we need to protect it, not even talking about the sense of this is something we need to preserve, but beginning with this question of, why do you enjoy being here? How do you feel when you're in the natural world? What does it feel like when your hands are in the mud and we're out in the forest? And so the more and more we begin with creating these intentional opportunities for children to see that they're happy when they're in their natural world, we can go to the next slide and we can see what that can look like. So at some schools that I've worked with, we've developed these pillars for service, where we even begin to intentionally outline intentional opportunities for students to engage with the natural environment. So one school in Switzerland, we really focused on the idea that students would have the opportunity to explore the natural world. It was part of the 2- and 3-year-olds curriculum to engage in a nature forest opportunity or forest school learning. And the research shows that those emotional connections predict environmental concern. And when the children are exposed to the green environment, they want to take care of it. And it becomes this emotional connection that they have that stays with them through adulthood. Going to the next slide. And connecting to that environmental stewardship and that emotional connection then starts to spiral, where students can see the issues of equity and justice and can really start to make connections to taking action for social justice. It prepares them to serve and becomes adults who are prepared to take action, or youth who are prepared to take action when they see that there's a need. They start to begin their connections to local partnership and finally global connections. So we can really begin to see pillars of service and wider natural connections just by beginning with this connection to the natural environment and environmental stewardship. Next slide. So how do we do it? How do we make sure we're facilitating the learning in authentic ways where teachers don't feel like it's just another thing piled on, or it's just another outrageous expectation that's put into an already full curriculum, by making sure that we can see these curricular connections all the way through. Going on to the next slide, we can also help pare it down, make sure
I love her.
goals and the environment connections are put in a child-friendly way. The good life goals have been established where they take the sustainable development goal language and pare it down into youth language so that they can start to see that they love nature. Goal number 15, that they can really start to see what climate action looks like, and taking care of the waters in environmental natural ways. So again, bringing it down to this youthful language. Let's see what it looks like in action. Next slide. Here we go. Something as little as having children start a garden at school, where they're measuring, bringing in their math skills, learning about their connection to the natural environment, beginning to see how seasons can impact things. More than anything, they're out there having fun. The learning happens authentically in a natural way. They feel their feet in the dirt. They see that their mood increases. They cannot wait to get into the garden where math, science, literacy are all happening. The social skills are there, the speaking, the listening. It is all naturally there. And there are so many campuses now that are becoming more and more green campuses where children just get to walk through and pick and munch as they go along and learn about the health benefits of the food that they're eating as they go along. As the children increase in their ability and connection, we can see that just even engaging in forest school, where they're learning to climb and overcome obstacles and beginning to see themselves as more and more capable, they're building these emotional connections to the natural environment. They're seeing their own happiness connected to it. It spawns them as they get older to want to learn more, to go deeper into that understanding. Next slide. So then we can take more complex curriculum and begin to see where the sustainable development goals or the good life goals can go in. So here at a kindergarten level, we can see some science standards coming from the next generation science standards, where students are really starting to see about that interdependent relationship and ecosystems, knowing their parts amongst animals, plants, their natural environment. Taking it to the next slide. So getting in deeper to what children actually need to understand that would promote this environmental literacy, the nature literacy that we aim to develop, and this care for the next natural environment. The next couple of slides, I'll be able to show you how we can build in that increasing complexity. Sophie, next slide. So what do they need to understand? Here's an example of one school's curriculum where we were able to map from 3 to 4-year-olds to the 10 to 11-year-olds, and then all the way up until the 18 to 19-year-olds, this small development of what it means to share the planet and what it means to be engaged in the natural environment. Taking it on to the next slide. So we set up for 5 to 6-year-olds a transfer goal. So looking at themselves, they understand that connections to the natural environment can positively impact health and well-being. That's a big idea that can go all the way up through to our oldest learners. So what does that look like if I unpack that transfer goal? Taking it to the next slide. Their community, then they would expand that wider, that they can develop care and concern for the natural environment and contribute to the local community, where they begin to develop this sense of wonder and natural connection. So that's that next year level going up. Next slide. And then they understand that in the world, so for myself, the community in the world, they know about the interdependent relationships and human impact on the natural environment. This complexity of understanding can carry them from their smallest stage all the way up to the highest age. It's a foundational understanding. Next slide. And so they see that the engagement with the natural world connects to their personal happiness, and it can affect their relationship with the community for better citizenship, and they can have a positive impact on living things, which equals a better earth. All of it dovetailing and spiraling together to help build this human who wants to take care of the natural world. Next slide. We can, as educators, then really assess their understanding through natural performance tasks. So one example for these year 1 students, the 5 to 6-year-olds, their performance task was to build a campaign to help others understand their role in taking care of the natural environment. They had to include the sustainable development goals in their campaign. These were 5 to 6-year-olds who were able to do that. They were able to really help share their understanding of the natural world and convince others to be engaged in taking care. They made pamphlets, they made ABC books on how to take care of the natural world. They had little information sessions where they invited people to their garden so they could learn how to grow their own garden. It's pretty amazing to see what they were able to do. Some started to care about the animals that were living in it and wanted to take care of the hedgehogs and help build hedgehog houses. Their deep emotional connection was incredible. Next slide. So as students begin to develop in their complexity, they can really start to take on science and engineering practices, building these deep understanding of cross-cutting concepts, and really have the strong foundation that will lead them up to year 13. Next slide. Now, here's an example then of how that foundation helped lead the way for year 6 students who engaged in an exhibition project. It's like a capstone project that was tied to their sustainable development goals. Students chose one sustainable development goal. It was their culminating task where they had to deeply research that goal, look at the impact of the natural environment and the world around them connected to that goal, and imagine solutions following a design thinking cycle. It was absolutely incredible, the campaigns that the students started to take on. And they were able to do this because over time, they had this natural impulse, there's connection. They realized their own happiness and well-being was intrinsically tied to the health and well-being of the natural environment. And they built a mindset and skills along the way to be able to tackle complex issues. We see this across the globe, that when students develop these natural connections to the environment, they have this why, this deep need to protect it, and they know that they're deeply connected to the well-being of the earth. And then if we see what that can look like as they get even older, taking it to the next slide, we can see students who are ready to be advocates. This most recent generation of youth have really been leading the way on climate action, organizing protests, standing up for what they believe is right, making sure that their schools represent what is right. I've only had 10 minutes with you to be able to kind of plug the way that we can go forward, but really taking these complex ideas of the Sustainable Development Goals and not being afraid to take it down to our youngest learners, making sure they see their personal connection and their happiness when it's connected to the natural environment. That's where we're going to get youth who are ready to take action, and adults who have the skills, the mindset, and the heart for sustainable practices. We know if we just try to implement it through law or order, if someone doesn't have this emotional connection to the earth, they're not going to be inconvenienced by some of the actions they may need to take for sustainable practices. So beginning young, making it scaffolded, small steps, beginning with the heart, connecting it to the mind.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Erin. We really appreciate your time and sharing your work with us about this really important topic. And yeah, it's really interesting to hear about, setting that emotional foundation for kids. And that's what really builds, you can then build in kind of the information and background as they get older. That's, yeah, really interesting. So we have time for some questions for Erin now before our next speaker. And I will open up the chat and see if anyone has posted any questions in there. Again, please feel free either to post them in the chat or out loud if you unmute your mics.
Yeah, I see the comments that many organizations have matched the UK curriculum to the Sustainable Development Goals. Absolutely. I think schools across the globe are really embedding it, and it's so important that we see it all coming together. I have someone asking if these are American science standards that were up. Yes, I used an example of the next generation science standards, which are tied to the International Baccalaureate science expectations and are used in international schools across the globe. Chris, I see your hand raised.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, that was great, really interesting to hear, particularly that thing about getting kids young. That's one of the things at WWT that we really focus on, trying to get them a hands-on experience of why the environment and particularly wetlands are so important. You mentioned, how you justify this, how you get teachers engaged and willing to take part in this. Do you have kind of practical ways that you could suggest that really get teachers on board and kind of break that barrier of, the curriculum being too heavy, or they don't have time, or they can't transport their kids? myths, all of that kind of stuff. What would be your key kind of suggestions for how we do that better?
Starting small, I think, especially in UK national curriculum, there's a big push in the early years for play-based learning. And so making sure that the environment is a part of that play-based learning with, it's really easy to start a simple little garden. It's just a few pots, right?
Yeah.
But also making sure that the adults feel their own natural connection. So I always suggest, let's get the teachers on a field trip when we're launching this. Like, let's get them out gardening. Let's get them on a forest walk. And as we go along walking, let's talk, how do you feel? What's going on with your breathing? Do you know research shows that your own happiness and well-being is connected to time in nature? Well, if we know this for you, what could that look like for the children? What's one little thing that you could do right now? Giving the teachers the opportunity and the hands-on experience of, let's go out and garden. Okay, in your math standards that you're doing right now, what do you see that you could do? And that they always come up with the ideas. I find that when we do the hands-on experience for the adults, they can naturally start making the curricular connections really easily. And it's a matter of often school leadership getting out of the way and allowing the teachers the space to make it happen. I often go through a curricular mapping opportunity with teachers where I say, okay, if we're going to give this a go, let's look at all the possible literacy connections that you can make. Let's look at the numeracy connections now. Let's look at the speaking and listening. And it's so easy to see it all come together. So keeping it really simple, engaging the adults in it themselves, and providing the opportunity and the space for it to happen.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Yeah, great ideas.
So I'm just reading through some of the comments in the chat box now, and I can see that Anne Finlayson was mentioning, so I think that's the comment that you read as well about the UK implementing some of the Sustainable Development Goals into the curriculum already, so that's great. And there's some links there from Anne as well, which if anyone wants to go and check those out. I'm just checking for any further questions, but I think that covers it.
Sophie, I think Chris has his hand up.
Oh,
Other Chris,
over to you.
Chris, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Chris.
Thank you. It just occurred to me when we were looking at those pictures of young people enjoying nature, quite a lot of them will be thinking about what they want to do with their lives when they start to earn a living. Most kids want to be train drivers or nurses or astronauts or whatever, some sort of ambition. And I'm just wondering at what point in all of this that we start encouraging future young professionals into thinking about careers in nature and the sorts of things that they might aspire to achieve.
I think there's two things that I always promote schools to take on. One, instead of asking children, what do you want to be? What problems do you want to solve? We know that careers are going to significantly change over time. What problems do you care about? Like what really pulls your heartstrings? And that's pretty amazing to see how that starts carrying through. And the second thing is always engaging youth when we're talking about a curriculum through the lens of experts. So how would an architect see this? How would a scientist see this? How would a nature conservationist see this? And getting young children, how would a biologist see this? What would a botanist say? So the more they start thinking about, they can see different careers within themselves, that they have the skills to think like a scientist, think like a problem solver. It really can start changing how they think about careers. Why do they want to be astronauts? Why do they want to be firefighters? It's exciting, right? Getting experts into the classrooms at the youngest age. I always have teachers bring experts into the classroom, even as for our 3 and 4-year-olds, so they can start to see different careers and how exciting it could be to be these different things. So that's one. If we think about on the career pathway, I think the second thing is to see that even if you do choose to be a banker, you can be a banker with social responsibility, and you can use your time on the side to do things that matter. You can choose to grow your home with a green rooftop or an edible garden, or you can harvest the food in your own yard to promote equity for people who don't have access to food, right? So it's promoting these mindsets that can be woven into any career choice that someone makes. But again, beginning young, the framing and the language that we use with youth is really important.
Absolutely. I think that's something really interesting to think about. And I remember someone talking to us when I was in school about the fact that probably most of the careers that we would go into didn't exist at the time, and that, you know, you never know where your interests and passions might take you, and it might create new career paths in something that people are passionate about. So it's, yeah, so important to create that passion and interest in nature.
I think it's also, I'm just one note on that. I think it's also really fascinating for children to see if they're really obsessive about space, because they often go through that phase around year 5, year 6, where they start to become obsessive about astronauts and space, and helping them even see how much of space exploration has come back to help us with sustainable practices, and helping to see that you can be an astronaut who also contributes to solar panels. Our research in space has helped us to better understand what's happening in the waters, and protecting life on land and life below water. So helping them to connect the dots is really important. My son, for example, when he was young, we were really lucky that we were in a school that promoted a lot of connection with the natural environment. He was obsessed with trains. And then he decided that he wanted to start to develop and design solar powered trains and planes so that they could be cleaner. And so he started to connect his love of nature with his other love for trains and airplanes. So children start to make those natural connections when they have those, the mindset and heart to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. It must be really exciting as well, kind of developing these things with kids and seeing them all, you know, become more interested in these topics and make those connections. So fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for all the questions as well. I would encourage everyone as well to check out some of the links in the chat, but I will try and share those in the follow-up email after the webinar with links to get in contact with Erin as well about her work. So we will move on to our next speaker. So next, we are so pleased to welcome Mary Caldwell as our next speaker. Mary is a successful producer. Oh, let me share the slide. So Mary is a successful producer and author who has been recognised as one of the most influential conservationists in the UK and the winner of the RSPB Medal for Nature Conservation in 2022. So Mary has had a successful career that has centred around communicating her passion for the natural world to others, particularly when it comes to curlew conservation. So we welcome you all to celebrate World Curlew Day with us on the 21st of April. Today, Mary is going to be talking to us about her experience in spearheading the successful campaign for the new GCSE in natural history, alongside Caroline Lucas, the Green Party MP for Brighton Pavilion. So this new GCSE was approved in April 2022 and will be implemented by 2025. So over to you, Mary.
Hello everyone, it's great to see everybody, and thank you for inviting me. First slide, please, Sophie. Yeah, next one, thank you. So let's get real actually about the position we are actually in. You know, young children, they love the natural world, they really do. They just need to be given the opportunity, the encouragement to get stuck in. But something happens to kids once they reach that 12, 13, 14. Either it happens to them or we impose it on them. But there is a big drop-off engagement with the natural world once you get to teenagers. So we've heard all the lovely stuff that Erin has been talking about encouraging that activity, but we have to keep that going. And at the moment we're failing. I mean, what have we done to get these statistics? So this is from an online survey in 2019. And I think most of us watching this will know exactly what this is talking about. 50% of kids don't know what a nettle is. Most don't know a robin or a bumblebee, certainly don't know what a cabbage white or a large white butterfly is. How have we got to the state where young people are that disconnected from nature, that these things which are so common around us all the time have no meaningful place in their lives? And I find those statistics, and there's many others that keep coming out, some of the most heartbreaking things to read, because that's not a world we have to live in at the moment. We cannot live in a world where children do not know what things are around them. Next slide, please. Not only do we not know what they are, we don't even go out there and look. So a generation ago, and certainly kids of my generation, we spent most of our time outside. There were far fewer people on the planet. There was less angst about safety, and there were more green spaces. I grew up in Stoke-on-Trent, so I wasn't in the middle of the wilds at all. And I now live in the centre of Bristol. I know what it's like to have lack of space around you. Yet even in Stoke-on-Trent, you know, in the 1960s and 70s, there were places to go. They're far fewer now that are easy for kids to get to. So 75% of children spend less time outside than prisoners. That's the statistic, an hour a day. And 40% of kids barely ever go outside. So if you don't go outside, if you don't feel the wind and the rain and get mud on you and know what it's like to be in that sort of messy, unpredictable environment, how on earth are we going to live in the future? How on earth are we going to make the decisions we need to make in the future? So those last two slides, how little we know and how little go out there so we even have a chance to know, are things we have to put right now, not sometime in the next few years, now. Next slide, please. Reflecting that, the Oxford Junior Dictionary, one of them, there are a number of them, but one of them for the age group we're talking about, has removed a number of words. Look at them: acorn, nectar, leopard, lobster, mistletoe, heather, willow, magpie. Next slide, please. Lots of children, they said, don't need to know these words because the new words they're putting in, like blog, chat room, attachment, and so on, have more currency for today's young people. How have we got to this stage? How have we got a blog or a chat room to be more important than the engagement and understanding of the physical world around you that Erin was talking about? How have we got to this stage? And I think we all have to ask ourselves that, all of us, whether we've got kids or not. We all have to look at the society around us and try and ask the question, how has it got to this stage? Next slide, please. If environmental education worked, said Ray DeYoung, who's an education psychologist in America, we wouldn't be having the problems we're having, right? The IUCN Red List, look at all that. Look at all those creatures, those groups of wonder and magnificence that are threatened with extinction. This isn't, oh dear, what a shame. This is a tragedy. That all that stuff that gives us the delight, the wonder, the scientific curiosity, the fear, the sort of inspiration, the creativity, all of it is disappearing under our noses, if we even notice. If we even notice. I was talking to a bird watcher, quite a seasoned bird watcher, yes, about 2 or 3 days ago, and said, you know, the reed bunting has now disappeared, it's extinct in Ireland. And he said, is it? That's amazing. I don't think many people in Ireland know the reed bunting has gone extinct. We should know. We have a duty to know. It is our duty as a human being to know what's around us, what's there, what's disappearing. and why it's disappearing. This isn't some niche interest for geeks with a pair of binoculars. This is for all of us to know and understand. We should not be in the situation where we're going to lose so many species. Over half the biomass on the earth has gone, has reduced, has disappeared in my lifetime. In my lifetime. That is a terrible indictment on us. Terrible indictment. And if this environmental education, which we're just waking up to now, actually had worked, we may not be in this situation. We have one hell of a mountain to climb if we're going to get back to a healthy, thriving natural world. And it won't come about by having nice feelings about things. It'll only come about by real grit, determination, study, sacrifice, being able to do the things that we have to do if we're going to live alongside a living natural world. It's not easy. This isn't going to be an easy job. It's going to be really tough. And we've got to prepare, help prepare the young people coming through to cope with the mess that we have left them. That's the situation we're in. I sound like an absolutely archetypal, doom-laden, do-gooder conservationist, but I can't sweeten it. I can't, you know. I can just, the bird I work on, the curlew, that I have a particular interest in, not only because I love it as a species, as a most wonderful, magical bird, such a beautiful addition to the landscape, but it also is a sort of bellwether for what we're doing to the land. Since the 1980s, Ireland has gone from 5,000 breeding pairs to 100 breeding pairs. Just let that sink in for a minute. We have lost over half the breeding curlews in the UK since the 1990s. It's just appalling, the state of the natural world. A lot of time and effort and talk, quite rightly, goes into climate change. Of course it does. Biodiversity gets less of a message because we haven't yet made that connection, which Erin was talking about, that vital connection between a healthy, thriving planet and a healthy, thriving human population. The next slide, please. So, the Sustainable Development Goals, which we're talking about today, no poverty, that's about nature. That's about having equitable resources and people having enough. Zero hunger, it's about nature. Good health and well-being, as Erin explained, it's about nature. Quality education, which inspires kids to be creative and forward-looking and problem-solving, their ability to deal with a big, messy world. Nature. Gender equality, nature is open access to all. Clean water and sanitation, obviously nature. Affordable and clean energy comes from nature. Next slide, please. Decent work and economic growth, that's an interesting one. How do we have economic growth and still have a sustainable natural world? Well, unless we have people who understand what nature is, we're not going to have any economic growth at all. Industry, innovation and infrastructure, all of it based on resources the natural world gives us. Reduced inequalities, only if we have a world that provides equally and sustainably to all will we have an equal world. Sustainable cities and communities, 100% nature. Responsible consumption and production, nature. Unless we put nature into the very heart of our education, none of these goals will be realized. Climate action, of course, inextricably linked with the natural world and how we treat it. Life below water, life on land, but also peace, justice, and strong institutions. Pope John Paul II said, if you want to, I think actually it was Benedict, if you want to have peace, protect nature. It was on the World Day of Peace, and that was such a powerful message. One, again, we don't make the connection with enough. We will only have a peaceful and just world if we all feel we have access to the resources and the wonder and the glory of the world equally. And partnership for goals. We're not going to do this just through the RSPB or the wildlife trusts or whoever else it is. partnership across the board with civil society, with lawmakers, with policymakers, with politicians, with religions, with everybody else. All of us have to be involved in this, or we won't turn it around. Next slide, please. This amazing man, Richard Louv, Last Child in the Woods, written back in 2005. What a statement is this? The future will belong to the nature smart, those individuals, families, businesses, and political leaders who develop a deeper understanding of the transformative power of the natural world and who balance the virtual with the real. The more high-tech we become, the more nature we need. What kind of statement is that? Could we have that on every single billboard, every single building around the planet? And that was written in 2005. The future will only belong to the nature smart. So how do we get the nature smart? I think every junior school, as Erin was pointing out, has to do all those wonderful things that she was talking about. But we have to go further. We have to get teenagers and young people absolutely 100% bought into this and see it as their future, not as something quite nice, not as something that's a bit different, not as a soft option, something that is fundamental to our future. So an only way to do that is to put it right in the heart of schools. So the GCSE in natural history, which took 11 years of campaigning to actually get the yes in April this year, is now in the development phase. Let's hope that that goes through to developing individual exam boards, producing really vibrant, meaningful, connected courses. So whatever exam board you choose, what school chooses, it's there, ready to go to inspire the next generation. And we can't stop there. We've got to have A-levels, even degrees in natural history. I want to do a professor of natural history in every single university in the country, because only by doing that will we make sure natural history has the right place where it's meant to be in society, not sidelined, not something just for David Attenborough to talk about, all of us. It is absolutely essential that we do this, not just because our future's health, well-being, everything depends on it. It is what will provide the wealth which will keep societies ticking. The wealth, however we want to decide the wealth. So when the government commissioned Partha Dasgupta, a professor of economics at Cambridge University, to come up with the contribution that he sees nature is making to global economics, he came up with this extraordinary report, which is nowhere near lauded enough. It has made such a powerful case. And he comes at it as not a nature person. He comes at it as a number crunching economist. And he realized in that report how important the natural world is to our future, to the economics that keeps countries working. At the very end, I took part in a session that he organized. He said he wasn't going to put education in there because he couldn't quite see the connection. But he set up a round table and I was invited to go and talk to this. Out of that came the last chapter of that economic report. And I wrote it alongside Partha Dasgupta. And when he launched his Dasgupta report, that was right in the middle of lockdown, so it was an online launch, not a physical one. The very last bit of his launch to the public was the next film. If we could play that, please, Sophie. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just check that everyone can hear that through the microphone?
There's no sound, no.
I'll restart that. I think it was because I was muted. Here you go.
The review ends with a plea that our education systems should introduce nature studies from the earliest stages of our lives and revisit them in the years we spend in secondary and tertiary education. The conclusion we should draw from this is unmistakable. If we care about our common future and the common future of our descendants, we should all, in part, be naturalists.
Thank you. So I think this is beyond important. I think this is critical. I think the biodiversity COP coming up is the eyes of the world should be on that COP and should be on what their country's doing. Every single country should put nature education right from primary school, preschool, right to the end of further education, whatever that is. And we should all be passionate about it, learn about it. So part of the thing that I'll be doing is rolling out, getting money to roll out nature education, sort of, if you like, hubs around the country, so that teachers who want to take up the GCSE in natural history don't feel unsupported, that they have access to podcasts and webinars and films from the best naturalists in the country, that everybody has access to the very best, because unless the very best inspire us all, I don't think we'll make the changes and make the sacrifices and make the plans we need to make to turn this around. But at least we've got something to work with now. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary. What an amazing career so far, and incredible impact you've had on these topics. And, you know, it's clear the passion you have for this topic really comes through. So I'd like to invite the audience to ask Mary any questions now as well. So I can see Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work on recognising that nature connection and creating that emotional connection with nature is much more important than the facts, which is what the first presentation was all about today. Is there a danger that the natural history GCSE becomes all about the facts and doesn't promote that true emotional connection amongst the young people that we're looking for? And if so, how do you prevent that from happening?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Mark. And when I first put the proposal into the Department for Education, I put a whole section on the contribution nature makes to our culture. So
Brilliant.
Contribution has to English literature, to music, to art, to poetry, so that real engagement would be there. The Department for Education took every single bit of it out and said, it's a deal breaker. Either it leaves or we don't agree it. So there was nothing I could do about that. That was with alongside OCR, the exam board OCR. So we just have to rely on enrichment modules and making sure that that enrichment material is there. But I also think, you know, that let nature do the speaking as well. Mm-hmm. So once we get kids out there and we get good teachers really themselves inspired and inspiring the younger people, then that creativity will naturally come to the fore. That's what I'm hoping. But I would have loved to have had part of it, as you say, but there we are. We've got something, which is the main thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The key bit will be the teachers, won't it? As you say, if we get those teachers that have that passion themselves to put that across to the children, then they will naturally do that. That's why I'm so determined that the teachers in the next 2 years, before teaching in 2025, any teacher that wants to teach it will feel that they've got access to that and be inspired themselves. That's the only way. That's where our focus has got to be now, I think. Thank you.
I can see Simon's got his hand up as well.
Yeah, hi Mary, thank you for that. Excellent. Is the intention for this to eventually, perhaps at least, become a compulsory GCSE? Because otherwise, isn't this just catering to those who are already interested in natural history? Is there a way of sprinkling this into plenty of other courses that students will take as well, if this isn't a compulsory GCSE?
Yeah, there was just no way it would have been made a compulsory GCSE. That just wasn't even given as an option, I'm afraid. And so we had to put it as a choice alongside geography and history and so on. That was the only option open. I think other courses, I was at an English literature teaching course recently for universities who teach English literature, and they were absolutely dying to get involved in making the connection between, you know, literature, poetry and fiction and the natural world. I think we'll see that happening. I think using nature to tell us more about maths or geography or history, which it's relevant to all of those things, will start to happen more and more. And that would be the dream, wouldn't it? To make those connections to all of life, because this is about all of life. It's not just about sort of an add-on to biology or whatever. It's fundamental to everything. So I'm hoping so. And a part of inspiring the teachers will get other teachers involved as well. You know, anybody could teach. If you're a history teacher, there's no reason why you can't teach natural history if you've got the right skills. And then you would naturally bring in, hopefully, that other passion as well.
I think that's right. I think that's the key. It's spreading it across and out,
Yeah,
isn't
I
it?
agree.
I'm good. Thank you.
Great. Chris has his hand up next.
Just to make the connection between what Erin was saying about experts and IUCN being the world's largest network of environmental experts, how can we assist teachers with that expertise that we need to put in front of young people? Could there be a directory of people willing to contribute?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Why don't we just keep in touch about that? I mean, have you got resources that are downloadable that would be useful to teachers? Provide experts to give podcasts and webinars and little films to go into schools. There's all sorts of things like that, which are all being sort of thought about and collated at the moment. So it would be great to keep in touch with you about that.
Absolutely. The Commission on Education and Communication, for example, that Sophie mentioned earlier, I'm sure we can pull something together. Thanks.
And you'd be welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be really happy to keep in contact. So we'll send out any links or contact details that you'd like in the follow-up email to anyone that's attended today. But we'll also hopefully, the whole aim of the CEC is that we're trying to get people in contact, get people to collaborate, avoid any duplication of work, so that everyone can work together just to be most effective and most efficient in this work that we're all passionate about. So I'm sure that we'll have many contacts that would be interested in linking up and making that happen.
Yeah, and Sophie, if I could add on, I think the world's largest lesson is an incredible resource that has thousands of opportunities for teachers to learn about teaching the Sustainable Development Goals, and having that connection where they could see a data bank of experts that they could reach out to would be amazing. So that's a portal that already has captive teachers from across the globe. I know in the UK as well. And then a second one is there's an organization called Skype a Scientist that helps connect educators with experts. And the more you can broaden that database, the better. Teachers are always looking for experts. It's just not knowing exactly how to find them.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we can kind of facilitate those platforms to put people in contact, and we'd be really happy to be involved to help with that. I'll just mention that I'm aware of the time, so we will, if anyone is still free to stay on, I'll just wrap everything up, but wanted to mention that if anyone does have to run off, then that's no problem. There's so more links that have been mentioned in the chat again, so please do have a look at some of those links there, and again, if any links have been shared, I can copy those through to the follow-up email. And so yeah, that's so great. I'll try not to run over time too much, but I really wanted to make sure that we thank Erin and Mary for joining us today, because it's fascinating to hear from both of your experiences on these topics. And I'm really glad that we were able to generate some interesting discussion, and I hope that everyone was able to take away something new, something inspiring from our speakers today. We are planning future webinars as well, so the next of which is currently planned for January with the theme of youth engagement and intergenerational partnerships. So following that, we have some topics in mind, such as human well-being in nature conservation, which is a topic that's close to my own heart. And we're also thinking about one potentially to do with the role of zoos in conservation education. So if any of these topics sound like something that's of particular interest to you and you'd like to participate as a speaker, or if you know someone who might be interested in these topics, please do reach out to us, as we're still kind of shaping the content for these talks, and we'd love to hear what would be of most interest to our members. Please feel free to suggest other topics or other speakers. We'd love to hear from you. Alternatively, if you are watching this as a recording, then please do get in contact or comment below any topics that you'd like us to focus on in future webinars. So before we finish off, I'd just like to open up to anyone if anyone wants to make any final questions or comments. And so if that's the case, I'll just say thank you again to our speakers, Erin and Mary, thank you so much. Thanks, Chris, as well, for doing all of the admin and tech background. And there's and thank you all for attending the webinar as well, I have to say. We appreciate your time and input, and you can learn about the upcoming webinars and any other updates by following us on our social media channels. So just by searching IUCN NCUK. If you'd like to request a certificate of attendance for the webinar, we can also provide these on request by emailing chrisman@iucn.org.uk. So that's the email that is currently on the screen. Thank you so much.